I'm David G, Sheshnaag.com, Sheshnaag Yoga Center, and what on earth is Kundalini? I've been a little bit confronted recently in regards to my favourite subject of Kundalini. I've been finding that Kundalini in general, I've always thought it got a bit taken out of context in the Neo-Tantra movement. I come from a traditional background where Kundalini awakened for no specific reason. Then I went into the traditional lineage to do with the Dashnami order of a great saint or sage, Shankaracharya, and it's very traditional, the 10 lineages in the Ashram under the guidance of the Guru or the Guru's teachings in the current world. I love it, especially if it's uncomfortable for me. I try and love it even more. There's a place on the planet in Australia called Byron Bay. In the Byron Shire, you have a few beautiful spiritual places. Seems like it's the epicenter of Neo-Tantrism in Australia. If you look right into Neo-Tantra, which is the new interpretation of Tantra, remnants of the 60s and 70s, the word Tantra comes from the definition or your translation of transcendence of the physical reality. There's a lot of emphasis that I've come along to do with full body orgasms, awakening the Kundalini through some sort of yoni or lingam massage, predominantly yoni massages. It can happen. My experience is that I come from the traditional background, not the new foreground, which has to do with this pleasure-based spirituality. I come from a non-spiritual, non-pleasure-based interpretation of spirituality. You know, the very rational perspective. When I slip the word in non-spiritual, nothing about my life is non-spiritual. I'm totally in the spirit, I'm totally intuitive, and I totally sit back and worship the divine and the most subtle form of life and how it coordinates everything from behind the scenes. In this earthly plane, I understand that we're going into the experience of unconditional love for the other human. So through the representation of Neo-Tantra, which is pleasure-based, hopefully there's displeasure in it too. I've looked into it. People saying reprogram your mind from porn, which is hard because as a male in this culture, everything's hypersexual on a superficial level. And then you go into the first exposure that you get through an educational perspective of your sexuality, which is basically porn, or someone on the front of every magazine with their breasts enhanced through Photoshop and then sold through subliminal sexual programming. Wow, when I go into that deep, it almost seems impossible to reprogram from the porn psyche. But anyway, with the Neo-Tantra, I found that it's like sort of new age porn in a way. Everyone's talking about these tantric groups on Facebook. They're all talking about how they can last all night sexually. It's not me, but it might be them. They've done the techniques, they've picked out specific tantric techniques and been able to encourage that so they can last all night sexually. I wonder if giving your woman a full body orgasm or some sort of squirting orgasm is to do with the pleasure of the male or the pleasure of the female, and not many people are understanding or expressing that it's about unification with God or realization of the self. Maybe they're going into their heart and awakening love for themselves and then being able to express that in a physical way. Maybe I'm confronted by it because I need to understand and express that love, that unconditional love. I'm way far in the spirit to the extent that the pains in my life have made me leave the body and not want to come back to it. Maybe the pleasure of full body orgasms is something I need to look into. Retention of sperm is an essential component if you want to please your woman. Who knows? I'm just putting it out there that from me, my perspective and my analysis, I found the full body orgasm and over-endorsement of it in the sense of being spiritual and how it's represented as a bit of a farce, a bit of a new age porn, a bit of a over-endorsement of the sexual expression. And then it comes back to, isn't life just an expression of sexual energy? It probably is, because if you look at all those buildings and carvings, the tantric ones, of where there's a whole shitload of gopis and there's only one or two Krishnas, or there's these orgies carved into stone on the side of a building. I don't know if it's a real physical representation of it. I think in some ways maybe there was one of the 5 arms of Tantra was to do with that sort of experience where you have orgies and full body orgasms and unification in love. Probably be a better world if we did focus on that. I think it's probably the interpretation that everything in our existence is an interaction of the divine consciousness, which is seen as Shiva and masculine, and then everything to do with manifestation and the expression of life is to do with Shakti and matter, or the condensed form of energy, where consciousness is the non-manifest, non-condensed form, and there's a play between the two. Matter and consciousness intertwine in a phenomenal way. I think this is it. That's why they worship it, because that is the essence of life, because consciousness is dancing through the expression of manifested energy. And the dance of those atoms is how we experience life. And through the dance of those atoms, that's how we experience the self, the true self, the underlying unity of life, our true universal nature, and how we're connected to everything. There you go. Neo-Tantra has its place after all. Hopefully you get an experience to feel it and share the love. I wouldn't endorse it at the expense of any contentment in your life, because I've looked into it and I confronted myself many ways regarding it. That's a video for another day, or not another day, another time. I'll make one now about my list of what I wrote on my wall and how things have been quite confrontational and unpleasant this year. But I've had very big growth within my identity, and one of them has been exposing myself to Neo-Tantra. That's enough from Sheshnaag.com. Share the world. Sheshnaag Yoga Center. What on earth is Kundalini? Peace. Om Namah Shivaya. Har Har Mahadev. Har Har Mahadev. Har Har Mahadev.